Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting of the California Housing Finance Agency Board of Directors to order and ask Pam to call the roll, please.
Ms. Avila Flores. Mr. Brown for Mr. Chung.
Vince Brown for Treasurer Chung.
Ms. Gallagher. Mr. Gunning.
Here.
Mr. Hunter.
Here.
Ms. Riggs for Ms. Podesta.
Here.
Mr. Prince.
Here.
Mr. Metcalf.
Here.
Ms. Sotelo.
Here.
Mr. Russell.
Present.
And Ms.
Here.
Ms. Ortega. Here. Ms. Boatman Patterson. And Ms. Fall.
Here. Before we begin with everything, I just want to remind the board that we have converted now from a transcription, a verbatim transcription of the meeting to videotaping, and because the videotaping is searchable by name, you need to raise your hand and let me recognize you so that we get it orally on the tape. So if you wish to speak, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. And so the first thing I'd like to welcome, we have two new members today. The first one is Ben Metcalf, who is our new director of HCD. And Ben, welcome, and if you'd like to say just a few words about who you are so everybody gets to know you.
Thank you, Janet. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm very excited to have returned to California to head HCD, and of course very pleased to be able to play a supporting role for CalHFA and for the work of this board, as well as for TIA during my tenure here. I'll say, by way of background, obviously I have some familiarity with California from having worked with statewide development for many years before my tenure at HUD. I also have a little bit of familiarity with CalHFA from my work at HUD. While I was there, I headed up the Office of Multifamily Housing Programs, which, as many of you know, was the part of HUD responsible for its FHA insured programs, including its risk share program, which CalHFA has been is one of HUD's more active members. And as Tia and I were just talking about earlier this morning, helped launch the Federal Financing Bank Initiative, helped launch the Section 811 Project Rental Assistance Program. So a number of pieces. It's quite a pleasure for me to return now to California and see that some of these things that I worked on in the abstract from Washington, D.C. have a little bit of traction here in California and perhaps can offer a little bit of benefit. So thrilled to play this role on the board and looking forward to being as helpful as I can in CalHFA and leadership here to deliver on its very important work and mission.
Thank you. And our other new member today is Stephen Russell. Welcome, Stephen.
Well,
Glad to
thank
have
you.
Here.
Thank you. Well, I am Stephen Russell. Am I supposed to say that at the beginning? So it's my pleasure to be here today and be a part of this board. My immediate past experience, I'm presently executive director of the San Diego Housing Federation, but I spent the previous 11 years in architecture. Prior to that, in government service and in economic development. And prior to that, marketing and exhibiting foreign films. So if you have any questions on Fellini, Kurosawa, I make lots of Rashomon references when we talk about policy. So there's people of an age who understand that. In any case, I'm really pleased to be here and hope to bring also a decade of experience on the board of the City Heights Community Development Corporation to bear on the role that housing plays in community building. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to item 2 on the agenda, approval of the minutes of the January 13th, 2016 board meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve? So moved. A motion from Ms. Riggs. A second?
I'll second it.
Second from Mr. Gunning. Pam, do you want to call the roll?
Ms. Avila Flores. Mr. Brown for Mr. Chung. Ms. Gallagher. Mr. Gunning.
Yes.
Mr. Hunter.
Yes.
Ms. Riggs for Ms. Podesta.
Aye.
Mr. Prince.
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf.
I abstain.
Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
I abstain.
And Ms. Falk?
Yes.
The minutes have been approved. The motion was approved.
Thank you. Item 3 is the comments from the executive director, Ms. Boat and Patty.
Well, good morning. I did want to give you a report out of our recent legislative conference, the National Council of State Housing Agencies in Washington, D.C., that we attended earlier this month. 2 board members accompanied CalHFA staff. That would be Ms. Avila Reyes and Mr. Gunning. I thought it was a very successful trip. We did get a chance to meet with the HUD folks responsible for the risk share program, and we did meet with U.S. Treasury. We also met with the HUD folks responsible for the VASH vouchers and talked to them a little bit about a potential demonstration project using VASH and the VHHP. They were engaged. They had continued questions, and they said that they would continue to engage, but we did overall think it was a very worthwhile trip to be able to make those acquaintances with those staffers and folks responsible for those programs. I too would like to welcome our new board members. I'm very excited about Mr. Russell and Ben sitting in their capacities here on the board. I'm looking forward to Susan continuing to sit on the board potentially for the agency, so she's just changed chairs. So that's nice to see. Now, I do want to recognize that we have a couple of new board members, and timely getting your information back to the Senate Rules Committee. So if you have not returned your oath of office or any of your paperwork or that documentation related to your Senate confirmation, please be sure and turn that information in, because we must respect that process so that we can make sure that board members that are appointed go through that process. Mr. Russell is a speaker's appointee, so there may be a little less paperwork that you need to do, but when they send you something, please respond. Okay, very good. So I just wanted to get that out there on the record. I have been invited to serve on the Fannie Mae Affordable Housing Council, and I've accepted that invitation, which I think is a pretty unique opportunity for California to continue to be at the table as we're talking about new products and going forward, duty to serve our low and moderate income communities, and so I'm honored to sit in that position, and will be taking yes, Mr. Prince.
Thank you. I have to be called on by the chair now, right? So,
Yes.
so
Thank
the
you.
first thing I want to say is I've always called it Fannie Won't. So I'm glad that you're going to be on the Fannie Mae group. I find them to be incredibly difficult to work with when it comes to the local community, and so just want to say that. But the other thing I want to say, so we have received a VHHP award in Fresno. We did not partner it up with VASH, and our particular reason is that VASH does not allow you to serve people who are less than honorably discharged. And so what we're finding is that's a very critical component within our homeless population, and so I just want to also warn you to think about that as an issue, that VASH is not necessarily the right component all the time with VHHP if you want to serve some individuals on the streets who were less than honorably discharged. So I just want to bring that up as well as you deliberate on that connection.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, discussion and recommendation and possible action to increase the area median income for single-family program eligibility to 140%. Mr. Geiger.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Claire.
He doesn't want to have to say my last name.
No.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Claire Tariainen, and I'm a staff attorney at CalHFA.
And I'm Ken Giebel, and I'm the Director of Single Family Lending at CalHFA. Too far? Okay. Just a few comments on the proposal. The 140 AMI proposal is intended to support more workforce housing in our higher-cost counties. We often refer to it as the missing middle segment from 120 to 140. And we are permitted to do this, and our legal counsel will tell you why.
Historically speaking, when the agency has used non-bond financing, the ceiling for area median income has been 120%. However, Section 50093 of the Health and Safety Code permits the agency to do a review and analysis of whether or not that 120% AMI ceiling is sufficient to serve, pardon me, potential homeowners in designated geographic areas throughout the state. Specifically, we're talking about high-cost counties in California. What we found after doing that research and analysis is that there are roughly 35 counties in California where the disparity between the housing prices and the 120% area median income is insufficient to help enough Californians. So today, we'd like to ask you to increase that amount and lift that ceiling from 120% AMI up to 140% AMI, only for conventional products and only in the 35 designated counties.
We started looking at this last fall, just to let you know. When we started in 2013, our average loan amount on our mortgages was $218,000. That's both FHA and conventional. Now it's $237,000. It's gone up over the last 2 years, just to let you know what's going on, even in the lower end, low to moderate end on our loan amounts. This proposal will enable us in these 35 counties to reach over 500,000 households that are currently renting in these counties. In Los Angeles County alone, it's over 200,000 renting households. So with that, if you have any questions, Claire and I'd be happy to answer them for you regarding the proposal.
Ms. Sotelo?
Thank you very much for presenting this. I think it's wonderful that we're looking at how to empower workforce households to purchase. I think that's very important. Was there tell me a little bit more about the criteria of the cutoff of the 35 counties. Why 35? What specifically were your criteria to determine that?
We used the formula that you saw. We used LA County as the example, where we take the average income and the average home price, compare the national to California, and we used a cutoff point of 1.40 ratio, housing ratio, and below that we thought that 120 on the conventional side, the Fannie Mae product, would be adequate in those remaining counties. Okay?
Thank you for that. Again, I commend you for looking at this issue.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Gunning?
Can you just explain, legislation authorizes us at 120, but Health and Safety Code says we can go higher? I'm not sure I understand which we follow.
Sure. So when we're using non-bond financing, the Health and Safety Code designates 120%. But for if we find that there are areas throughout California, geographic areas, where the 120% ceiling is too low to help people in those high-cost counties ever purchase a home. So what we've done, and we've done this in communication with BCSH and HCD, is to collaborate on whether or not this would be effective and useful, and now is the right time, and we think that it is. So Health and Safety Code doesn't say any particular ceiling. It entrusts us to use our judgment as to what would be the right ceiling to make sure we're helping a sufficient number of people.
Michael, we talked to other HFAs, and 140 seems to be the correct amount, and we've also talked to Fannie about it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, Mr. Russell?
Working here, there we go. So I definitely support the intent of this program and commend you for doing this. I will say there's a charge term you're using, which is workforce housing, because we work in a lot of 50% AMI.
Mhm.
3 members of the family are working. So I just want to lay that out there as maybe a term we can find other nomenclature for.
Thank you for that.
Any other comments, Ms. Riggs?
So I think this is really excellent if we can expand the number of, first-time home buyers through expanding the area median income eligibility. I'm very curious to see the success in the future. I mean, given, the cost of some of these markets, whether 140% even gets us there. I mean, certainly in some of the markets it will. So I guess what I would ask is whether maybe this time next year, we can maybe get a report back on, how this is really faring in terms of opening up the market for these households.
We track monthly, we track daily our reservations, but we track them by FHA. We track them by conventional, and we have our different buckets of AMIs that we look at on a quarterly basis.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Any other comments? May I hear a motion to approve?
I move
Mr.
approval.
Hunter?
I move approval of Resolution 1602.
Is there a second? Ms. Sotelo?
I'll second approval.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Ms. Riggs? Aye. Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Aye.
Ms. Sotelo?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Falk?
Aye.
Resolution 1602 is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Cavalier will talk about the mid-year update of the business plan, item 5.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Good morning, Chair Falk and members of the board. I'm Don Cavalier. I'm the Chief Deputy Director at CalHFA, and today I'm here to provide the board with an update on the mid-year results of our business plan and our operating budget. In May 2015, the board adopted the 2015-16 business plan, which was designed to reinvigorate the agency's lending activities and increase future income opportunities. While previous business plans had focused on stabilizing the agency's balance sheet and repairing the agency's credit ratings, the agency's 2015-16 business plan is focused on the future of CalHFA. And our mid-year results and revised projections for the fiscal year show that we are on the right track. The current business plan consists of 3 primary goals. 1, to reinvigorate lending activities, grow the agency's balance sheet, and increase future revenue. 2, to align lending activities with state housing policy and increase operational efficiency. And 3, to help prevent avoidable foreclosures by providing assistance to eligible homeowners who have financial hardship and or significant negative equity through our Keep Your Home California program. Correspondingly, each business goal has key strategies identified for achieving these goals. The first key strategy under Goal 1 was to generate income from single-family lending opportunities. For fiscal year 15-16, the single-family lending program targeted $605 million in first mortgage loan purchases and $75 million in down payment assistance loans, and targeted the generation of $5.75 million in new revenues. The following tables compare business plan goals with actual mid-year lending volume and revenue generation, and includes revised projections for the remainder of the fiscal year. At mid-year, first mortgage loan purchases were $454 million, or 75% of business plan objectives, and the program expects to purchase in excess of $880 million in first mortgages by the end of the fiscal year.
Can I interrupt for just a second for those of you board members who don't realize that you do have a handout of the PowerPoint in case you cannot see the screen, so just want to let you know that. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. The down payment assistance loan volume is trailing our original projections, with mid-year results at $22 million, or 29% of our original goal. And this lower down payment assistance production is directly tied to our recent policy change that now requires CalHFA down payment assistance to be paired with loans, our first mortgage loan products. With regard to revenues, single-family lending programs are significantly outpacing original goals. At mid-year, actual revenues were $4.2 million, or 74% of business plan goals. And based upon our latest projections, we expect to earn $7.2 million by the end of the fiscal year. The next table compares actual units produced at mid-year to the fiscal year goal and provides revised projections for the remainder of the fiscal year. With the exception of the down payment assistance program, unit production in both first mortgages and MCC issuances are outpacing original business plan goals. As mentioned in the last slide, the drop in down payment assistance is directly tied to our policy change, requiring CalHFA down payment assistance to be tied to our first mortgages. In previous years, roughly 60% of our DPA loans were issued on a standalone basis, meaning that they were tied to another lender's first mortgage product. In addition to increasing CalHFA's first mortgage loan volume and extending funding availability for down payment assistance, the policy change allows CalHFA to ensure that down payment assistance funds are being used in the best interest of the borrower and in compliance with GSE lending requirements. Other mid-year highlights for single-family programs include adding our zero-interest program down payment assistance product to our FHA loans, which when combined with our new My Home down payment assistance loan provides our borrowers with up to 8.5% of the sales price or appraised value, whichever's lower, toward down payment assistance and closing costs. Another highlight is the completion of the single-family lender's manual, which serves as a resource to lenders working with CalHFA. We've also added a new pipeline of single-family loans with the addition of our mortgage broker business line. And finally, given the significant increases in our single-family lending volume, we are continuously evaluating ways to improve the efficiency and profitability of our MBS delivery model, including the exploration of alternative master servicing arrangements and the activation of our seller servicer number with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The second key strategy under Goal 1 was to generate income from multifamily lending opportunities. Multifamily lending targeted $100 million in first mortgage lending, $100 million in conduit issuance, and $30 million in Mental Health Services Act lending, with a combined revenue and asset generation target of $6.5 million for the fiscal year. At mid-year, the multifamily lending program closed 5 first mortgage loans for $74 million and 10 MHSA loans for $14 million. Combined, the two programs expect to close $116 million by the end of the fiscal year, including our first multifamily transaction using the HUD FFB risk share program, and that's the Palos Verdes project. And I think we believe it's going to close either at the end of this month or early in April. Our conduit issuance program is doing much better than initially expected, closing 9 transactions for $146 million, exceeding the annual business plan goal at the mid-year point. The agency expects to close over $300 million in conduit issuances by the end of the fiscal year. At the end of December, multifamily lending programs had combined for $4.1 million, or 63% of the revenue generation target for the fiscal year. However, we expect to fall slightly short of our fiscal year goals of $6.5 million, given that most of our remaining pipeline is set to close right after the end of the fiscal year. So July and August, we have a bunch of projects teed up to close right about that time. The next table reflects our multifamily unit production at mid-year compared with our original goals and provides projections through the end of the fiscal year. From a unit projection standpoint, the increase of our conduit issuance financing has provided a boost in unit production, and we are projecting that unit volume will reach 90% of our goals for the multifamily lending product, and that the other two programs will exceed goals for the fiscal year. Other mid-year highlights for multifamily include the adoption of a policy governing the use of our CalHFA surplus funds for gap financing with CalHFA multifamily lending programs. Additionally, multifamily has updated their underwriting and loan approval processes and completed a comprehensive training program for staff designed to refresh underwriting skills and to prepare them to compete in the multifamily lending space. Another important strategy under Goal 1 was to strengthen capital reserves and improve liquidity of the agency. Accordingly, a key element in that effort was to find a replacement for the temporary credit facility provided by the U.S. Treasury during the financial crisis. This is known as the Temporary Credit and Liquidity Program, or TCLP, and it was set to expire December 23rd, 2015, and CalHFA had committed to fully retiring that obligation prior to that date. Through the tireless efforts of our finance department, CalHFA refinanced variable rate bonds and with fixed rate bonds and strategically used cash to reduce variable rate bond exposure, all of which contributed to the willingness of private banks to provide replacement letters of credit to retire the remaining $510 million of TCLP on July 22nd, 2015. The various debt restructurings and replacement of the TCLP strengthened our balance sheet and resulted in several credit rating upgrades during the first half of the fiscal year, and most recently in February 2016. In July 2015, Standard & Poor's upgraded our home mortgage revenue bonds indenture from A1 to A with stable outlook. At the same time, Moody's affirmed its A3 rating of the same bonds. Several months later, S&P announced an upgrade of CalHFA's overall credit rating from A- to A with a positive outlook, citing 2 consecutive years of net operating profitability, upward ratio trends, improved asset quality, and equity levels. In February of 2016, Moody's upgraded the HMRB indenture and the CalHFA overall credit ratings from A3 to A2 with a stable outlook. The next 2 charts illustrate the historical trends surrounding CalHFA's credit ratings for general obligations, the multifamily bond indenture, and the single-family bond indenture known as HMRB. As you can see, since the lows of the financial crisis, CalHFA has steadily climbed back up the ratings ladder. While S&P has been quicker to provide upgrades, Moody's has been historically quicker to downgrade and much slower to upgrade. But slow or not, the upgrades are coming. So we're on a very positive trajectory. With respect to goal number 2, the first key strategy was to complete CalHFA's organizational assessment and implement recommendations that increase operational efficiencies. The agency completed the organizational assessment in July of 2015 and has implemented many of the recommendations outlined in the report. Some of the highlights for the first half of the year include consolidating our loan servicing staff from our West Sacramento office into our main office at 500 Capitol Mall and letting the West Sacramento lease expire. This is going to save us $30,000 this year and $343,000 per year going forward. We also sublet 3,500 square feet of our unused space in Culver City, saving $42,000 a year. We consolidated our multifamily lending division and the asset management division under a single management structure and appointed a new director of multifamily programs. During the budget process, we eliminated 12 and a half positions that we had determined to be unneeded. We implemented a comprehensive training program I mentioned previously with our multifamily departments. And we began proactively marketing our conduit issuance program, and we've seen a significant uptick in production from that effort. Merging the portfolio management division with single-family lending as our REO and loan modification activity has been replaced with the increases in lending. So we've shifted staff from the portfolio management section into our lending as the needs have changed. Another key strategy of Goal 2 was to develop a long-term strategy to monitor and mitigate enterprise risks. At the mid-year, we have made limited progress in this area. However, the agency has actively participated in the State Leadership Accountability Act risk assessment and reporting process. Under the requirements of the Act, CalHFA must continuously assess the internal and external risks impacting operations, reporting, and compliance. As risks are identified, the mitigating controls are identified, or a corrective action plan is developed and implemented. Our latest report has been posted to our website, I believe, last week, per state requirements. Further on this area, the agency is moving forward with the recruitment of a vacant financial risk manager position and is developing a quality control department for single-family lending to meet the requirements for the receipt of our seller servicer number with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We're also considering the creation of a new position, Director of Enterprise Risk Management and Compliance, to oversee all enterprise risks and compliance efforts of the agency, and Tia mentioned that in her opening remarks. Another business plan strategy was to ensure that IT projects and planning efforts focus on the efficient flow of data between systems and departments and promotes timely and accurate reporting. To this end, the agency has established an IT governance committee to ensure that IT planning and activities are supporting our business plan objectives. In addition, the agency developed and implemented a comprehensive records management and retention policy and refined the function and use of our enterprise content management system to better meet the business needs of CalHFA. Finally, IT has completed an important upgrade to our mortgage access system that has automated the process by which lenders submit loan files for both review and purchase, which has really expedited and streamlined our operations and is creating a lot of efficiencies within the single-family unit. And we've got several more phases to go that we think are going to yield additional benefits. Sorry, I got a little behind there. Another key strategy is to enhance delivery of affordable housing through collaboration with HCD and other partners. As it relates to MHSA, our interagency agreement between CalHFA and the Department of Healthcare Services to administer the Mental Health Services Act program is expiring on May 30th, 2016, and staff has surveyed stakeholders across the state regarding their interest in participating in a similar program administered by CalHFA. The response has been very favorable, with several counties committing $30 million of new money or unallocated MHSA funds, and staff is finalizing the documents to close out the original MHSA program and roll out the new one. CalHFA is also administering the HUD 811 program in partnership with the Department of Healthcare Services, HCD, DDS, and TCAC. The program provides rental subsidies to permanent supportive housing for individuals with disabilities. The goal of the program is to remove these individuals from long-term care facilities and allow them to live more independently. HUD awarded 2 rounds of funding across the country. California received $11.9 million in round 1 for statewide program and $12 million in round 2 for Los Angeles County. CalHFA is currently administering $3.3 million in 6 projects and 96 units of the first round award. State partnership released the NOFA in early February 2016 for the round 2 award. Funds will begin to be dispersed for round 2, I believe, in 16-17. CalHFA is developing a small loan program for loans that are under $3.5 million. The program will serve an underserved market by providing loans with competitive rates and terms for smaller multifamily developments, and I think we'll bring that forward as it begins to take form. And additionally, I'm going to change the nomenclature from workforce to missing middle, but we're really looking at developing a new missing middle housing loan program that we want to target tenants earning 60% of area median income or higher. And the federal low-income housing tax credit serve as the major subsidy for affordable housing, but only provide benefits to units that are restricted at 60% AMI or below. In high-cost areas in California, market rents are in excess of 100% AMI, and the intent of the program is to serve that missing middle, those earning 60% AMI and market rate rents, by providing favorable loan terms and shallow subsidies from CalHFA. For goal number 3, the strategy was pretty simple, which is to maximize the use of our Keep Your Home California funds to help prevent avoidable foreclosures. To accomplish this, CalHFA formed a nonprofit corporation called the CalHFA Mortgage Assistance Corp., doing business as Keep Your Home California, to administer California's $1.9 billion allocation of the U.S. Treasury's hardest hit funds. The funds administered are intended to help prevent foreclosures due to financial hardship or significant negative equity. At the mid-year, the program had provided $1.2 billion in assistance to over 56,000 homeowners, and there are 5,672 eligible homeowners in the active pipeline pending final benefit determination. On February 9th, the U.S. Treasury announced an additional $2 billion investment in the hardest hit funds, and California's allocation of that is $213.5 million. Are there any questions before I move into the operating budget? Hearing none? Yes.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate the update on the work plan. It's all very impressive. The numbers that you guys have achieved in both multifamily and single family are very impressive. And I appreciate the areas where you're contemplating cross-departmental collaboration. I think one place in particular that I wanted to kind of emphasize is in the IT realm. As I think most folks know, there's been some challenges with aligning and understanding kind of the scale of housing that we produce in the state through all of the statewide partners. And I'm not sure if this presents an opportunity to begin to think about how to better align our IT systems, but I would encourage you guys to maybe bring in HCDs, IT professionals into the conversation just to see if there's anything proactively that could be done, and perhaps the same with the Treasurer's Office as well.
Okay. And we'll be going over the proposed business plan for 16-17 in April, and so we can kind of make that a little bit of the discussion in this area. Makes sense.
Yes, Mr. Hunter.
I also really appreciate the report, very commendable results so far. Just as a matter of interest would like to know a little bit more about the Section 811 projects that have been funded. I don't think if somebody could get me the information. I'm particularly interested in knowing a little bit about where the projects are, but who actually they're housing, and are they moving, what kind of populations they're moving out of long-term care. At one time, the Section 811 program was also a really valuable tool to house the most vulnerable homeless people with severe mental illness issues, and some of the shifting priorities, I think it might have made that a little less possible, but I'd be really interested to know who is actually getting housed.
Okay. I'll definitely follow up.
Did you want to respond?
We'll follow up with
Okay.
Mr. Hunter.
Okay. Yeah. Ms. Sotelo.
Thank you, Chair Fox. So congratulations to the staff. I mean, it's huge. This is really fantastic. I mean, we've been with this process I've been on the board 18 months. It's huge. Thank you for all the work that you've done, Tia. Thank you so much for your leadership on the single-family side, on the multifamily side. You know, the ratings, Tim. It's fantastic. And I think that, you know, for the board, it's really important that we commend ourselves as well, because we've really honed in the business plan into 3 articulate, characterized goals. And that, I think, makes it easier for staff to make them achievable. So as we think about what our goals are for the upcoming year and celebrate our achievements in this last year, I think it's important that we continue to do that and just hone our goals so that they're measurable and achievable and realistic. So congratulations for really doing a wonderful job on a lot of different levels. And on the multifamily side, I just wanted to address one question, which was the delay in closings and not quite hitting our mark on the multifamily lending side. Those delays in closing have to do with third-party issues, developer issues? What are the reasons for that?
I could let Tony Surge speak to that, but I believe it's just the nature of when the applications were received and kind of when they're going through the normal, TCAC process and at what point they'll actually be able to close.
Okay, great, thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Ms. Gallagher.
My apologies if you addressed this earlier. I apologize for being late. One question I just had, I noticed in the report, the multifamily program's lagging a little bit, but the revenue gap seemed wider than the volume gap. And is that a function of competitive pressure and pricing? Or?
Well, I think there were several of the deals we closed, or at least one that's jumping into my mind right now. We made a concession on the yield maintenance side, which reduced our revenue take on that. That's one.
Can I just ask, when you do the report on the 811, if you can do that to the whole group? I'd like to actually hear the same information, so not just to Mr. Hunter. But
Sure, we can provide an update to the entire board.
I think that'd be great. I appreciate that.
I'll work with HCD and maybe have, it was Christina, but I'm not sure who it is now, but have them come and maybe deliver a report out at our next board meeting.
Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, I also would just comment that as a board member, having joined the board during the roller coaster of hitting a downswing on these Moody readings, makes for a lot more enjoyable meeting.
Yes.
I'd like to second that as well. Ms. Riggs?
I apologize.
That's no problem.
Don, could you, or Tia perhaps, just help me understand a little bit better, with the closeout of the MHSA housing piece, there are going to be excess funds at the end of that process, and so how are those treated?
I think 2 years ago, Di, correct me if I'm wrong, there was legislation that went forward that allowed counties that if they wanted their funds to be returned to them, that their funds could be returned to them. So there's already a process in place for counties to make that request and funds to be returned to them. And we thought initially there were going to be a lot more counties that did that, but it actually turned out to be just a few counties. But so there's a process in place for counties to make that request and to return them. What we're now seeing, though, is counties not only committing new funds, but committing their unallocated funds back to a MHSA 2.0, or I think we're calling it the Special Needs, Local Government Special Needs Program. I don't know what our acronym is for it.
SNAP.
Also, I want to make the board aware that the Senate leadership announced, I think in January, a potential bonding against the MHSA funds, Prop 63 funds, and they're calling that initiative the No Place Like Home Initiative. And that would require some legislation, some other things. So we're continuing to have that dialogue. We want to make sure that HCD is engaged in that dialogue. And we didn't want to stop our voluntary process while that may or may not come to fruition. But what we've told our stakeholders that if there is legislation or something that comes forward that would consider a new program, that we would back off. but we didn't want to get behind and have a gap in there not being a potential program to help that population while the legislature was pursuing something. So we're pursuing it in tandem, I guess is what we want to say. And we want to make sure that all the right players are at the table while we're having these conversations, so that as either our voluntary program is developed or the state program is developed, that we're making sure that we're collaborating and meeting whatever policy needs that we want to do to make sure that those funds are aligning to actually change systems.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up? So again, just on the unallocated MHSA funds, so in order to reserve those, the counties would need to pass a resolution by June 30, or how exactly does that work?
Is it a resolution? Do we have one of our multifamily legal attorneys here?
But some action needs to be taken.
Some action has to be taken by the
by
counties to
June
ask.
30th, yeah.
Yes, and they all know the process.
Okay.
They've all been notified, they've been notified of the dates, they all know that here's the process, because we went through a whole, how do you make the request, how do you go about it? So they're all very much aware, and like I said, that legislation passed 2 years ago, and they are aware that as May 16th, the original MOU with the Department of Health Care Services and CalHFA is going to come to a termination.
All right, thank you.
Okay, if you'd like to proceed with item 6,
Okay.
budget.
All right. Update on our mid-year operating budget. In May 2015, the board approved the FY 15-16 operating budget in conjunction with the annual business plan. The approved operating budget includes a resource budget of $62.5 million and an expenditure budget of $42.8 million, and includes 285.8 positions. At December 31st, resources were $4.8 million, or 15% ahead of mid-year projections, and operating expenses were $2.3 million, or 11% below mid-year projections. The following table provides a kind of a breakdown of what's been happening. Resources are trending higher than originally anticipated due to increased servicing income, the release of earthquake insurance reserves, accelerated loan repayments, increased lending fees, and the transfer of loans from an old bond indenture called the Housing Program Bond Indenture. During the first half of the fiscal year, CalHFA's single-family loan servicing division reacquired the servicing rights of over 1,000 CalHFA first mortgages previously serviced by a third-party mortgage servicer, and this resulted in increased servicing fees to the agency. The release of the insurance reserves that I mentioned and the increase in loan repayments are the direct result of higher than expected prepayment speeds on our loan portfolio. We had budgeted conservatively at about 6% of the portfolio repaying, and the actual rate of prepayment is closer to 18%. Similarly, fee income has outpaced expectations due to the increases in single-family lending activity that we previously discussed. Finally, another contributing factor to the increase in resources was the redemption of all the bonds under the HPB bond indenture and the transfer of residual assets from that indenture into our operating fund. The loan repayments received from those transferred assets resulted in an additional $1.4 million in unanticipated resources. The operating budget is $2.4 million, or 11% under budget at mid-year, due primarily to salary savings from vacant positions, increased reimbursements for staff services provided to other state agencies, and cost savings from professional service contracts and strategic projects. At the mid-year mark, salary costs were trending 7% under budget due to the increase in vacant positions from employee retirements and separations. To ensure the efficient use of staff resources, we always require that each department justify that their workload supports replacing a vacancy. And even if there is a need, we typically look to another area to see if there's a possibility to make a transfer between areas before we move forward with a recruitment. At the mid-year mark, we had 35 vacant positions, of which 15 are in various stages of the recruitment process. And several of the remaining vacancies are being considered for elimination in our 16 and 17 budget. Additionally, reimbursements for staff services from HCD and Caltrans were not anticipated at the time that we built the budget. but we've been doing work for both entities and getting some reimbursement for staff costs, so that's also helped. And several of our professional services contracts have not been utilized or are scheduled to have the majority of their expenditures in the second half of the year. And so that's helping to show a savings at the mid-year point. Overall, CalHFA's operating budget is projected to come in at $39.2 million, which is well within the approved fiscal year operating budget of $42.8 million. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Don. Ms. Sotelo?
Don, can you please remind me if the approved budget included the elimination of the 12.5 positions?
It did.
It did?
It did.
So it already reflected that?
It already reflected it.
Reduction?
Yes.
Okay. And then with regard to the reimbursements, I know that there was a point of discussion on the MHSA work that we were doing, that it wasn't breaking even in terms of staff reimbursements.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? And
So
we
what
can
I know about that is in the MHSA 2.0, or I forget, the acronym is SNAP that we have going in terms of what we're preparing to do. We've retweaked the fees so that they are a break even now, because before in this prior round, we had basically been doing it for free in terms of the cost versus the revenue. So we believe that the new proposal, I think that's been floated around to a lot of the stakeholders, which from what I understand is acceptable, allows us to break even.
So this budget doesn't necessarily reflect that 2.0 negotiation?
No, not at all. No.
And then in terms of keeping your home affordable, is there any fee or any cost to us as CalHFA to run that nonprofit, or is that's all internal to keep?
We have a couple of agency staff that work basically, I guess for lack of a better term, we'll say under contract with Keep Your Home California, and Keep Your Home California reimburses us. That reimbursement was factored into the current year budget. It was just the HCD and the Caltrans, which were working on those Roberti properties down in your area in Southern California. Right. And so we have an MOU with them that we got approved after the budget process had been done. So.
Okay, but it's reflected in this
Yes.
budget. And, okay, and then just my last comment to Tia, I think that, you know, the way you broke down the resources versus the operating budget is very helpful. It's a lot cleaner than it's been presented before, so thank you very much for that clarity.
Mr. Russell?
Just a quick question. The services provided to Caltrans, again, you just alluded to them.
Yeah, we have an MOU with Caltrans to provide some staff services in the development of a loan program to help them sell, I believe it's about 350 properties that are in the Pasadena, South Pasadena, and LA County or City corridor, where they were going to build the old 710 freeway that had never come to pass. So Caltrans has owned property for, I believe, 40 years, and now has the desire to stop being a landlord and wants to sell them. And in partnership with HCD, we're trying to develop a process whereby they can dispose of those properties.
Mr. Prince?
Yeah, this looks really exciting, and so I have all kinds of different questions. So you really think a pretty high increase from mid-year to end of year for extraordinary items? And I'm not quite sure I understood why.
Yeah, on the extraordinary items, what I mentioned was the assets that were transferred to our operating fund from a closed-out bond indenture,
Right,
and so
okay.
those are those are the extraordinary items that we're anticipating seeing.
Okay. And then how much of this is like restricted? I mean, 34 million surplus seems really exciting, but is it restricted, like the loan repayments, I assume, are restricted when they come back?
These, I believe, no, these are all, I believe, within the operating fund itself, so they're not restricted within an indenture.
They're
So,
not.
yeah.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to commend the staff on this report, because this is even better news than the business plan report, especially for those of us when we didn't even see revenue. So it's very pleasing to see that you not only we're making some money here, but exceeding the expectations. One question that I have for you is, do we do the budget next month? We're going to do the business plan, and then the following month we're going to do the budget.
You'll approve the business plan and the budget at that point.
Both
Yes.
in the following. Okay.
Yes.
Have you considered doing more than 1 year of projections either 3 or 5 years, and if so, is that something we can take a look at some point?
I think eventually we're gonna get there. I think it was just stabilizing and then now bringing in revenue. And so that is something we commit to looking at. I don't know that we're quite there yet, but it is something we'll continue to strive for. And I have to give kudos to my chief deputy who, when I sat in this position as a board member, wanted to see operating expenses and revenue together as a package. And so the way we've now structured this to be more clear to you all as board member, I do owe some of that to the chief deputy, because when he came on board, I said, we gotta have this, and it's not showing, it's only showing one side. So he put a lot of work into this and making sure that you had the app. So I do commit that at some point, I think we'll get to a point to where we're able to see trends and have a better idea of the revenue that's coming in that may not potentially be just one-time funds, so that we can get a better opportunity to do some longer-term projections.
Yes, that would be very helpful. Mr. Prince?
Yes, sorry, I had a third question, and I totally agree with you. This is really exciting. And so those of us who've only been on for the 18 months or 2 years, and we keep hearing about the stabilization and this other period, I think we do need like a balance sheet, because the thing I think is missing is like are there obligations and liabilities that happened in the past operations that are being covered by this, and I just don't know. So I'd love to see a balance sheet as well.
I don't know if the board gets the annual report. We do have that. We could also probably work on providing some quarterly financials that we prepare for other agencies, rating agencies in line.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Right.
We get to spend money
Okay.
since you're coming up.
Any further questions? Thank you so much. That's all really good news to hear, and it's very helpful to the board to have this kind of information, get a really overview of what's going on. And now we'll move to item 7, discussion regarding multifamily lending programs. Mr. Sertich?
Thank you very much, Board, for having me today. I think a lot of what I was going to cover today has already been at least broached through the business plan or different questions you've had. So please, I'll go through this fairly quickly. I just wanted to update you on where we are on the multifamily lending side. But please interrupt at any time with questions or comments that you may have. The first thing I wanted to cover was our multifamily production, and you should have this as a handout if somewhere there. This is really following up on what Don just presented. It's the production of our multifamily programs group. The time period is slightly different. This goes through today, our lending volumes. We have, as Don said, the second half of the fiscal year was really, we had fewer projects closing. Part of that was due to market issues. Part of it was due to TCAC timing. But I'll show you the pipeline that we do have on the next page. It really is spiking, and a lot of these are going to be closing in the fall. The big issue on the first lien lending that we have coming up is the FFB program. We have seen a lot of interest in that, and the other program that we have on the first lien lending is our small loan program. We have, I think, 2 or 3 small loans that we expect to close in the next 6 months, and that program I think will pick up once we start marketing it in a wider fashion. The MHSA lending. The large amount of projects we have closing here are the counties trying to utilize the remaining funds in the MHSA accounts before it closes in May of this year. So we have LA County and a few others have a few projects coming in that we expect to close in the next 6 to 8 months. The MHSA loans can take longer to close. They're tied to 9% tax credits, and so there's a longer closing period for those than there are in most of our first loans. Our conduit issuance continues to chug along, and we have a lot of interest in that from different developers and different banks that want to work with us. They like our approach to the conduit issuance. I also wanted to follow up on 3 programs that we're developing, 2 of which Dawn talked about, and I think there were some questions about. If there's further questions, please let me know and I'll answer them. The first is our small loan program. This is for loans for under $3.5 million. We think it's an underserved market. We've been hearing from the board over the past couple years that we need to search for underserved markets, and this is one of them that we found. We do have, as I said, 2 to 3 loans in our pipeline that we are looking to fund through our small loan program. These loans will initially be funded with our earned surplus money, so we will not be, these are non-tax credit deals, these are non-tax exempt bond deals, so we will be using our own cash to fund them. And what we have found is that these loans do require more technical assistance oftentimes. They're not always with the biggest developers, usually with smaller developers or one-off developers that are looking for these funds. So it does require more technical assistance. The second is, as we've talked about, I'm calling our low-income loan program, our missing middle loan program. It is a loan program that will target the over 60 AMI renters, usually restricted at 80% of AMI. In talks we've had in different places, we've already learned not to call it workforce housing, because workforce housing, as we've seen, everybody has a different definition. That can be from 50 below or up to 150 AMI. Workforce, one very clever person told me that workforce housing serves people that work. So we're trying to focus this more on really the 60 to 80 or 100 AMI renters out there. The problem that we have with this program is when you're trying to provide subsidies for non-tax credit deals, it can become very expensive. We're trying to figure out how to make this happen, how to use market rents to subsidize some of these restricted rents at 80 AMI. We're also looking at, we've also heard that possibly inclusionary housing ordinances may tie well with a program like this. If inclusionary housing ordinances are restricting rents at 100 or 90 AMI, if we can bring it down to 80 with a small, with a low rate loan or something like that, we think that may be the way to go. But if there's any thoughts on how we can make this program marketable and usable by developers, we're all ears, and we'd love to hear from the board on how we can really encourage this and develop this to make it a productive program. The big program that we have going now, as we've talked about, is our Federal Financing Bank HUD Risk Share program, where an arm of the U.S. Treasury known as the Federal Financing Bank is purchasing HUD Risk Share loans, participations in HUD Risk Share loans from HFAs across the country. HUD and the U.S. Treasury just in the last couple of weeks have announced a 3-year extension of the program through 2019, which gives us the ability to now pair this program with tax credits and tax-exempt bonds with substantial rehabilitation projects and possibly new construction projects. This is a huge change for the program. It's something that I know Ben Metcalf has worked on a long time while he was at HUD. In the past, it was a year-to-year authorization, so if we wanted to go out and do a 2-year forward on a construction loan, we would have been taking the risk that the program may or may not be there. With the 3-year timeline and program deadline out there, that really gives us the opportunity to be aggressive and market this to a wider audience. And we think with the rates that it provides, the very low rates, the very long terms, a 40-year term, we think there is we think that this is going to be very competitive in the marketplace and could really put CalHFA, as a lead lender out in the marketplace. And that's what we plan on using this program for. Along with that, the lower rates, the longer terms, we think that the demand that may come with this program, we think we can be a little more focused on the projects that we're choosing. So we want to make sure that we're serving the right market that CalHFA should target. And we will continue looking through that as we develop this tax credit, tax exempt bond program. We'll look further at what markets we want to target with this program. The final quick update that I wanted to give that's also been discussed today is on the MHSA and Special Needs Housing Program. We have, as Tia had mentioned, we've rolled this out to the counties, our proposed term sheets for this program, our proposed participation agreements. And so far, we have 3 large counties that have committed $36 million for the next year as part of this program. We think that's just the start. More counties have expressed interest, they just haven't formally committed. We also have up to $30 million in existing MHSA funds, which can be converted over to the new Special Needs Housing Program to be used either to supplement COSERs or to develop, which are operating subsidies for the existing programs, or to develop new special needs housing programs under the MHSA larger umbrella. With that, I'll open it up to questions. And first question I'll answer is Mr. Hunter's question earlier about the HUD 811 Project Rental Assistance Program that we're administering. We'll definitely put a report together on that about, I can tell you that we have 9 projects that have committed statewide right now. The second phase that we've received from HUD, the second amount of funding, is limited to Los Angeles County. But we'll get a report together on the tenants that are being served and the locations of the existing projects for the next board meeting.
Are there any questions? Ms. Sotelo?
Just 2 questions. Thank you very much, Tony. On page 4 of your slide presentation, you talked about the loans of carriage changes and some that may not close for months ever.
Well, yeah, that may have been, I realize in reading this that may have been a little overstating it. I'm only putting loans that we expect to close, I should say, on here. But I do have to say on some of the MHSA loans that we have, those are the most likely to fall out for different reasons. Their funding sources change. The 9% tax credit is competitive, so if they get that or don't get that, that can change the ability of them to close.
Okay. And then with regard to the FFP loan purchase program, I think that it would be a good opportunity for the board to have a robust conversation on the policy side about what the right market is, what is the right market. I don't, I have a sense of what I think we should target, but I think the board should really kind of go in and explore what we believe to be the right market and what you're going to target. I'd love to hear a presentation from the staff around what the criteria is for rolling out that program.
Sure, we can do that.
Mr. Metcalf?
Thanks, Tony, for your presentation and for the great work you and the team have been doing, pushing the envelope on the underserved markets. Lot in there that I'm looking forward to engaging you all on the board here as my tenure begins. But I just wanted to flag really make a couple of quick observations. First of all, on the small loan effort, I think it's clearly safe to say that this is, as you say, a very different market than traditional multifamily lending. It's almost a hybrid of single-family and multifamily. You functionally are underwriting the borrower and the real estate kind of at the same time. But it's an area that has not benefited from good access to credit, particularly when you get outside of the kind of CRA hotspots and the other areas that are kind of higher income areas that the banks can serve well. I would say, really, in some sense, particularly to UTIA, but to everybody, that said, this has been an area of incredible focus for the GSEs, who have invested under the context of duty to serve a lot of staff resource and effort to try and come up and retool their small loan program, Fannie Mae in particular, but Freddie Mac as well. And they both have very interesting experiences because, of course, Fannie Mae in particular got hammered with their small loan portfolio now 10 years ago, and are kind of limped back together again to put something up and running. So there's actually both a cautionary tale there to really dive into as you get deeper into this, as well as a conversation just to think about kind of what the right competitive space is in this marketplace. Frankly, FHA, HUD also launched a small loan program targeting the affordable. So I think there's a lot of folks who are trying to launch and really push in the small loan space, and making sure that CalHFA kind of finds its niche and learns from those efforts is going to be very important. I'm also very intrigued and with the middle income lending program. I think has a lot of potential behind it. Again, for the board's benefit, I'll say that on the inclusionary piece, on the FHA insured side, the mortgage insurance premium discounts, which kind of was pushing out the door as I was leaving and go into effect next month, will actually include a premium reduction for market rate loans that have an inclusionary component in them. And so there's a question there as to what the ultimate take-up, increase in take-up will be just on straight FHA lending. But again, I think it's actually an interesting model, and it's interesting to think about the kind of competitive angle that CalHFA can have in the rest of the marketplace. But great work underway.
Thank you.
Ms. Riggs?
Okay, still on the MHSA thing, just a clarification on the closing of those deals and how they might be delayed. Is it only a commitment needed, or the money actually has to be?
We're requiring a commitment by this May. I'm sorry, it's more than a commitment. It's we have to approve the loan by this May, but the loan does not have to close until, I think, May of 2018, because some of them have a construction period, and we may only fund the permanent loan in some cases. So our money does not, the money does not have to be out the door, but has to be encumbered
So if they're
by
in the
this May.
second round for TCAC 9%, then they're okay?
As long as we've approved it with our internal loan committee.
And then just a second thing, just something to think about. One of the things I've been looking at a lot recently, and I think Tia knows this, is kind of akin to the old 80-20 deals. A lot of jurisdictions now are looking at 60-20-20 deals, or some variation where a portion of the units would be at market, a portion would be kind of in this missing middle, and then a portion would be kind of 4% tax credit eligible, and maybe that's a model that could be a fit for some of these products you're looking at. But it's something that I'm seeing be pretty successful, it seems, in New York City and Seattle, King County. So there's definitely kind of a impetus to go in that direction in high-cost markets.
Yep.
So that might be something interesting to.
I think that's something we've thought about specifically with regard to the FFB program as well, because we know that could be a very cheap financing tool for us to use. But it does require to have, a portion of the units at 50 or 60 AMI.
Well, I would just like to comment, as Tony and Tia both know, I've been encouraging multifamily that we look for areas for CalHFA to fill the gap that nobody else is doing, because we can't compete directly with the private lenders very well. So our role, it seems to me, is to find those areas of unmet need and try to fill them. So I want to commend you for starting on that path, and encourage you also to talk to your borrowers and customers about, it includes cities and counties as well, and other agencies of, where they're seeing need that people are having trouble getting financing for.
One last comment. I think Mr. Metcalf brought up a good point about the non-CRA areas. We know that's going to be a big focus of ours as well.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 8 through 12, which are all Mr. Sue. Series of resolutions here.
Good morning, members of the board and Chairwoman Janet Folk. So I thought that I start this series of resolutions with a quick update on credit ratings, and also use this conversation as a segue into the resolutions themselves. So you also have these slides in front of you. So as Don mentioned earlier, in January and February, we've gotten a couple.
Pardon me? You're a little too hot, thanks.
I don't think anyone has ever said that to me. I'll mention that to my wife, though. As Don mentioned, in January and February, we got a couple upgrades from the rating agencies. And this chart here shows a history of our ratings from S&P. And I think Jonathan and Mike, being the longest-serving members of our board, I think they kind of serve right in these red spots when we got a lot of downgrades in this 2009, 2010 era. And as Don mentioned, that era is certainly behind us. And the significance of this particular upgrade, which is highlighted in yellow, is that this is the first upgrade to our general obligation since 2008, since the financial crisis. And then also to tie this conversation to a question that Preston asked earlier, when Don is showing that we have this, what looks like a surplus of our income versus our expenses, that surplus is feeding into our general obligation. So the general obligation, so that money is not encumbered by the bond indentures. I know this is a little bit of finesse here. The money is not encumbered by the bond indentures. It flows into our general obligation, but the general obligation does have liabilities against it. So as a little bit of background, many, many years ago, I think this is the early 90s, most state HFAs got their general obligation rating or their issuer credit rating because of the HUD risk share program that was coming into place. And HUD wanted a general obligation as a counterparty. They didn't want to be a counterparty to a bond indenture. So that money is not, I don't want to spoil the party, it's not as if we can just give it away. It does feed into the general obligation. I like to be happy but also sobering at the same time. So it does feed into the general obligation. So it's a counterparty to HUD for the risk share programs, the loans that we have, and it's also a counterparty to our swap counterparties. So it does have obligations. And
I really appreciate you saying that. That's why I think that just showing a surplus was a little misleading. It got us giddy and happy, and so I think the sobering part is necessary to really understand it. So maybe take a little more time next time or down the road to help us understand what the general obligations are, right? Because it's taking a long time to understand CalHFA. So after 18 months, it's still not quite sinking in. So it'd be great to now understand that. Thanks.
we can certainly do that. I think that we'll plan on doing that in the April and May timeframe. But real quick, when we do that, one of the ways we do that is that sometimes I come to the board and show you that we have this cash that's unencumbered by the bond indentures and how we kind of set it aside. So that particular exercise is as a view of what we do with the cash and securities that's sitting under the GO. So on to page 3. So though the rating agencies are independent thinkers, as it turns out, we got an upgrade on our GO from Moody's 1 month after we got an upgrade from S&P. And this, too, is the first upgrade on our GO from Moody's since 2008. So as I said, I like to be happy about these upgrades, and it's indeed an accomplishment, and it's important. These upgrades actually on our GO have significant importance in that our swap counterparties are now facing a higher rated counterparty. So I think one of the risks that we had talked about at some point is our collateral posting risks. So in the height of the crisis in 2011 era, we had at some point posted about $130 million of swap collateral requirements to our counterparties. And because of various things that happened, including this particular upgrade, we're now only posting $30 million. So it's an important element of our overall story. But so also on a sobering note, however, is that though we have gotten this upgrade, if we look across the country and look at our peers' general obligation ratings, they tend to hover around sort of low AA, sort of kind of where we were before the financial crisis started. So we still have a ways to go, I think, to catch up to our peers, but it's certainly a fantastic step in the right direction. And this also sort of reinforces one of my main key message over the last couple of years is that we were at some point when sort of Mike and Jonathan joined the board, we're really focused on our legacy balance sheet risks, and I think that we can kind of put that aside for the moment and focus on new lending activities. So speaking of new lending activities, every year we come to the board in March to ask for authority on a set of resolutions that approve, that sort of delegates and approves our authority for financing lending activities throughout the year. So agenda item 8, which is the single-family bond financing resolution, so 1603, is the financing of our single-family lending activities through bonds. Last year, sort of looking ahead a little bit, last year we also came to the board and asked for authority on a set of non-bond financing resolutions, and I'll cover that in a little bit. But that set of resolutions is meant to cover some of the things that we're actually doing and we talk about a lot, for example, sort of financing our single-family production using this TBA model. So since the TBA model doesn't require bonds, we thought of sort of bringing them to the board separately because some of our non-bond activities expand outside of using this TBA model. So let's talk first about 1603, which is single-family bond financing resolutions. But to be sure, as we talked about, that the single-family model is now reliant on this TBA model, which is non-bonds or non-mortgage revenue bond financing model. This particular resolution is still really important. For one thing, it allows us to restructure our balance sheet and our legacy risks, allow us to continue to do that when we see the opportunity to do that. And it also gives us authority to issue new bonds should we sort of desire to diversify our revenue stream. And this is something I talked to the board about back in September, this notion that the current TBA model really gives us two economics, if you will. It gives us a one-time upfront payment, and it also gives us this 0% coupon down payment assistance loan, which is booked as loans receivable, but that revenue stream is quite unpredictable because should the home owner refinance, they would have to pay that loan off and we'll get a payment down that DPA. But should something bad happen, they were to default, then we have to write off that loan. So it gives us this somewhat of a sort of a combination of a small upfront payment along with a somewhat predictable revenue stream. The old model we use, which is the bond model, would create sort of perhaps a steadier and annual income over time because you're earning a spread on your bonds versus your mortgages. So that's something we really want to sort of head towards, and this is the year that we're thinking that maybe we can focus on that more when some of these issues that we've been working on, like master servicing, is complete. So again, we still need this resolution to restructure our existing balance sheet. We still want to have the flexibility to issue new bonds, and again, this is a focus of ours. And last but not least is that it does also authorize authorize to TIA and also staff the ability to get credit facilities. The authority that we're requesting does not exceed $500 million, and this will be for the purpose of as sort of warehousing or interim financing for the mortgage-backed securities. And I mentioned here that one of the possible ways that we can get a credit facility is from the state's PMIA board, and we have some history of getting a loan from the PMIA, but as part of the ask from staff today, we'd like to, if you would flip to, I believe this is page 46 of your board package. So this is on section 18 and first paragraph. The sixth line from the end of the paragraph, it actually states that any such credit facility may be from any appropriate source, including but not limited to the PMIA pursuant to the Government Code 16312. So with your indulgence, we'd like to strike the including but not limited to the PMIA so that it would simply read, any such credit facility may be from any appropriate source pursuant to the Government Code sections. So I believe that that's all my comments. If there's any comments or questions, I would take it.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
Yes, I just want to comment on the removal of the PMIA. We have had some conversations with staff in regards to this. However, we have not reached a conclusion that this would be a viable source. We have some concerns about a potential risk of a 30-day loan becoming a long-term credit and a potential impact on the state's internal borrowing. However, we are receptive to a conversation, but we were concerned that PMIA was specifically mentioned in the resolution, so I thank the staff for taking that action.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Gunn?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I had the same concern. I'd heard that Treasury was concerned about using that account too, so I concur with Vince's comments.
Alderman Patterson?
So there is I believe it's called an AB 55 loan, and is that from the PMIA account, that process? I ask, when the state agencies want to do short-term borrowing, and they do, I think the nomenclature is an AB 55 loan, where do they go to get that loan?
It is, but it isn't state agencies generally, it's just the Public Works Board, and so it's just for capital outlay projects in the state, and it's interim financing to get some early phase of a project started before the bonds are actually sold.
So there are...
I think though that it is a relevant comparison to looking for short-term. I think the issue that perhaps the treasurer's raising is a concern about it not really being a short-term loan. The AB 55 loans are kind of constantly being
Right, like a revolving loan,
exactly.
line of credit. And I think in some respects, that's what CalHFA is looking for, is a revolving line of credit that would be continuously paid back and revolve. And so we would like to continue to have those discussions, and so if this is an appropriate forum to express concerns or things that you would like CalHFA to look at, the impact on the state's long-term borrowing and those kind of concerns, so that if it's an issue of knowing when you're going to get paid back or how that would be structured, I think this would be an appropriate forum to lay out some of those concerns so that staff has some direction on how to continue to work through some of those issues.
Mr. Tulloh?
Can I just ask, and I don't know who the appropriate person is to ask, but is this something where you can't find this type of facility in the private sector?
Historically, we have had this with the state treasurer, and the state treasurer is the best partner in this. If we went to a private credit facility, it's going to cost us more. And so the best partnership would be with the state treasurer, because you would be able to borrow at a very low cost and then pass those savings on. And I think from 1994 through 2008, we had a revolving line of credit with the state treasurers. And so it's just getting staff back comfortable and continuing those dialogues and making sure we've done our due diligence to meet the needs of the state treasurer's office.
And then to the extent that perhaps those negotiations are a little bit more protracted, what's the impact on our lending as a result of that?
So, I don't want to get too hot again. Back in September, I talked to the board about, we're pursuing 3 different avenues. So we're talking to the Treasurer's Office, and I agree with Tia that that is the most cost-effective credit facility. And we're also talking to Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. That's the second most cost-effective. And we did have an offer from a private bank. And I think they mentioned that I need to refresh that. At the moment, it won't have any impact on our single-family lending. So what we're kind of preparing for is, though I didn't really make this connection directly, what we're preparing for is this day in which we migrate to issuing some bonds for our single-family production. And we're anticipating that day. And that day, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's something that we focus on, because we feel that for all of our earnings on the single-family side to come from this one-time upfront payment, it makes us a little bit vulnerable should, let's say, rates all of a sudden skyrocket, because then mortgage lending activities will dry up. So the old model we had, kind of creating annuity, is in large part how we kind of weathered the last couple of years, because we had these annuities that were created from many years ago, which kind of ties us through those dry years. So we have this focus of returning to that day, and these facilities are preparing for that transition, and that transition is not quite here, but we kind of think with the facility, it would in part enable the transition.
I have a question of clarification. By taking out this language in the resolution, does that eliminate any possibility of using the pooled money investment account, or is it just that you don't want to have it mentioned specifically?
We don't want to have it mentioned specifically
fine.
because we haven't agreed to it. And as to the point about the timing and what the ramp up is, we're not very clear on that. And as we all are aware, having been a former Chief Deputy Director of Finance, when we had our budget difficulties and had to have a lot of internal borrowing, we're locked up in some of these financings that turn into longer-term debt. That creates a problem for us, including sizing RANs and things of that nature. So we are confident that we can have this conversation, but we cannot commit at this time. So by removing that language, it leaves everything open, including conversations with the Treasurer's Office.
Okay, very good. Ms. Gallagher?
I had a question just on the time frame. So this is obviously something you do annually, well in advance of actual issuance. I was just curious about why the schedule aligns like that.
The schedule of life?
You're targeting March 2017 through October 2018 for this authorization. Is that just forward planning?
Oh, yes. So then our custom is not to request for authority on every bond issuance in part because it allows us to do things that's in between board meetings or ahead of the board meetings. So we have traditionally come once a year, and then it goes 60 days beyond the March of the next year's meeting, just in case somehow the March meeting didn't have quorum. So that's kind of our custom.
Is anybody willing to make a motion?
Can I, one more thing, sorry.
More questions? Yes, Ms.
It's a
Gallagher.
question/comment. I work for a firm that does municipal bond underwriting. We don't do work with the agency currently, and I don't think we're targeting, but I think I probably need to abstain from the vote, just because the timeframes are so far in the future. I just want to be
So noted. Ms. Sotelo?
I make a motion to adopt, I'm sorry, 1603 with the modification as outlined on page 10.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Gunning? Thank you. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher, abstain.
Abstain.
Mr. Gunning?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Ms. Riggs? Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Ms. Walk?
Yes.
Resolution 1603 approved as amended.
Thank you. Move to item 9.
Eileen, so Tony was just mentioned to me, so the resolution covers from now until 60 days after the March 1st, 2017 board meeting.
Okay, I was trying to figure out, it looked like it was 2017 through October 2018.
No. So it's from now until, it's meant to go from now until the next March board meeting, but then there's this notion that, well, what if we don't have a board meeting in March or we don't have quorum? So it's...
Thank you.
So the first one is always the hardest and takes the longest. So on agenda item 9, so now I'm going to cover the single-family non-bond financing resolutions. And as I mentioned, this TBA financing model that we talk so much about is not a bond financing model. And in 2013, we got the board to approve using a TBA model. But then we kind of felt that, well, it's sort of like integral part of what we do now, and then we also have had new board members come on board, and it's a better practice for the sake of being transparent to have this resolution come to the board every year so that you could see it every year and the new board members could be reminded of it. So as I mentioned, this whole idea that we're now securitizing our loan production into MBSs and then selling these mortgage-backed securities into the TBA market, this whole notion is being embodied in Article 1 of 1604. And we refer to it as this TBA model, which I think that is a bit, it's jargonish, but as I think some of you know by now, that it just means that we deliver these mortgage-backed securities into a much larger capital market, that is the mortgage market, which is trillions of dollars, than the muni market, which is small in comparison to that market. So this resolution also covers some of the things that we also talk about over time. It gives staff and TIA the authority to fund up to $20 million of using the agency's own funds to fund first lien whole loans. So what this is kind of targeting is the whole conversation with Caltran and also 710. This is our set aside for that particular program. This year, unlike last year, we're not requesting any authority to take any of our own agency funds to fund additional down payments assistance loans. This is the part of the reason for this is that there are some conversations of the state coming in to create additional state-funded down payments assistance loans. So at this point, we're not requesting any authority from the board for that program. So as you can see, I'm only highlighting a few of the things that we have sort of talked about over time throughout the year. But as you can see, this particular resolution, again, is sort of highlighting this notion that there are some things that we have done over time that we're including in this resolution for the sake of being open to the board about these additional things that we're doing away from the bond transactions, which tends to get the most highlight. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Let me, Ms. Boatman-Pedersen, sorry.
I'd like to make an additional comment about the down payment assistance. We had last year, I think, requested a certain amount of money to be, no?
We did $5 million.
$5 million.
Yes.
$5 million of our HAP funds, or our internal funds, to use towards making a more robust down payment assistance program. We had a statutory change that allowed us to pair some of our recycled funds together, and then we had some policy changes to change the administration of our down payment assistance program. So we are currently sitting on about $150 million of recycled down payment assistance, and we know that there's these conversations going on about aligning and being more effective to use our down payment assistance monies, new appropriations of additional funds. But so we're pursuing those avenues, and so right now Tim is saying we're not asking for additional authority to use excess general funds, so to speak, of our funding to do borrow, because we have money sitting there that we could probably just use more efficiently with some tweaks to legislation.
Are there any questions? Someone like to make a motion? Mr. Hunter?
I move adoption of resolution 16-04.
Second from Ms. Riggs. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Avila Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Gallagher?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Ms. Riggs?
Aye.
Mr. Prince? Mr. Metcalf?
Aye.
Ms. Sotelo?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Falk?
Aye.
Resolution 1604 is approved.
So now I'm going to move on to a companion, a set of two multifamily resolutions that covers, in some sense, exactly the same thing that we just covered for single family, except that they're meant for multifamily lending activities. So agenda item 10 is the multifamily bond financing resolution. And this one, unlike the single family bond financing resolution, the multifamily bond financing resolution is actually active from the standpoint of issuance of new bonds. So this is the resolution earlier when Don was talking about our lending activities on the multifamily side, either conduit or lending. Most of that is at the moment being bond financed one way or another under different articles of this resolution. The only exception is the FFB program, which does not require tax credits, therefore they do not require bonds. So the new bonds that we are issuing for our own lending activities are limited to fixed rate bonds. That means that we cannot issue variable rate bonds and use swaps. And it also has an article in the back that also provides authority to get credit facilities, much like the 1603. And that one, I would also like to make the similar edits under slightly different section. So on page 69 of the multifamily bond financing resolution, and this is under section 16, and I guess this is line number 12 on page 69. I'd like to strike this reference to the PMIA account. So starting from including but not limited to the pool money investment account, I'd like to strike that. So as I mentioned, this particular bond financing resolution is very much active, and it also gives us the ability to restructure our balance sheet to the degree that we see any opportunity. So last year, for example, we did do one large restructuring, a big refunding of about $150 million of our multifamily bonds. So it gives us ability to restructure our balance sheet, issue new bonds, which we do need for most of our deals, and does give us the ability to issue conduit issuances, which, as Don mentioned, that program is going quite well.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Frank.
Yes, just want to indicate for the record to reflect the comments that I made on item 8 in regards to the PMIA loans, similar for this item.
Thank you. Anything else?
Ms. Gallagher? Yeah, I'll also abstain on this one for the same reasons.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move approval of motion 1605 with the strikeout as reflected on page. Hold on.
69.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Sotelo.
back.
Second?
I second the motion.
Mr. Gunning?
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Avalon-Frias? Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Ms. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Metcalf? I'm sorry. Mr. Metcalf?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Sotelo?
Aye.
Ms. Russell? Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Ms. Balk?
Aye.
Resolution 1605 is approved as amended.
Now, this is the multifamily non-bond financing resolution. On this particular slide, there's a typo. It says bond issuances, but it should really say non-bond. So 1606 is multifamily non-bond financing resolution. This is very similar to 1604, except that 1606 is now covering this FFB program that you have heard so much about. And again, the FFB program is a light or moderate rehab program, so it doesn't really sort of encroach on the 4% or 9% tax credit world. So it does not require the issuance of bonds. So we kind of have this parallel universe over the last 4 or 5 years we have created because of certain developments in the marketplaces in which we are active in, or the bond market, in which we now have more of these non-bond related tools. And this particular resolution is capturing those tools that we have either discovered or sort of partnered with folks on. So in this case, the FFB program, we have partnered with HUD and also with U.S. Treasury. FFB, the Federal Financing Bank, is sort of a subsidiary of the U.S. Treasury. So this resolution covers the FFB program, for example. It provides a limit of $250 million in terms of this externally sourced or FFB program. I know we're going to hit that target this year. And it also, I'm just kidding, maybe. And it also allows us to fund or warehouse whole loans with our agency proceeds. So what this is that there are times in which the real estate closes before the bond closes. So what we would do at times is that we would take some of our agency proceeds to make the real estate loan first and wait for the bond closings to happen, and then when the bond closing happens, we swap the loan into the bond transactions. So I think we recently did this on a very large loan that we made on Wickland Vista, which exceeded $30 million. So this is something that we do, but as I mentioned, most of our deals are tax credit deals, so the warehousing is really oftentimes, again, to bridge between the real estate closing and the bond closing. Those are my comments. I'll take questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? We have a motion. Mr. Hunter?
I will move adoption of resolution 16-06.
Second? Second. Who's that? Oh, Ms. Alvia Farias. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Gallagher?
Aye.
Mr. Gunny?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Ms. Riggs?
Aye.
Mr. Metcalf?
Aye.
Ms. Sotelo? Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Ms. Falk?
Aye.
Resolution 1606 is approved.
And last but not least is our resolution to, the resolution from the board on an amount to apply to SITLAC. So this resolution is a resolution that you might recall last year we had a special November board meeting to increase our single-family volume cap request to SITLAC to a very high number for our MCC program. So for the single-family program, the home ownership program, we're requesting the board for $1 billion of authority to apply to SITLAC. So as a matter of reference, I've also provided here how much we have done last year. So last year we got from SITLAC about $1.15 billion for MCC. So again, that November special November board meeting was to get increase our authority up to $1.5 billion so we can basically absorb all the carry forward amounts that SITLAC had. And we needed it because our MCC program is doing really, really well. And so on the multifamily side, we're asking the board for up to $500 million, or $500 million. And again, this number, when put in context of what we did last year, I think is quite reasonable. We got $170 million of 2015 volume cap for multifamily lending and conduit activities last year, and we also used up $200 million of a carry forward amount that we have from 2014. So in all, last year we used about $370 million of volume cap for multifamily. So $1 billion for single family and $500 million for multifamily.
Are there any questions? Entertain Mr.
I'll
Gunning.
move adoption of resolution 1607.
And I'll second.
Second for Mr. Brown. Call the roll.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Gallagher?
Aye.
Mr. Gunny?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Briggs?
Aye.
Mr. Metcalf?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Resolution 1607 is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sue. So for those of you who are new, it's our practice, the reports that are item number 13 on the agenda, we do not discuss in detail unless someone has a question about any particular one. So are there any questions or comments that board members would like to make? And are there any other board matters?
I would like
If there's a direction that members of the board would like us, or things that the board would like us to look at as we pursue a short-term credit facility, we welcome feedback from board members on whether there's additional due diligence that staff needs to take, or if there's things that you would like us to look at while we pursue that. I'd welcome to hear back from the board on that.
Thank you, Ms. Boatman Patterson. So item 15, is there any member of the public that wishes to provide any testimony? Oh, I'm sorry, was there some feedback from Ms.?
Sure,
Yeah.
Ms. Bach, I'll
I
provide.
for later. I'm sorry.
Irina Ortega, I will say I'm happy to work with Tia and maybe have our staff kind of explain the process that we go through in terms of determining when to seek the AB 55 loan, how often it's repaid, and kind of, how they have a sort of a pipeline that goes through PMIA, and it may help to have our folks sit down and explain how we view the program and how we use it, and that might help in developing a proposal to bring back to the treasurer and make sure everyone can be comfortable with it. So our staff can certainly work with CalHFA staff on that.
Mr. Gunn?
I just had a question on the meeting schedule. We're back here again in April and then May. So we got 3 in a row. Okay.
April is to go over the business plan and get feedback from you regarding the business plan, and then May, we're back here to adopt the business plan and the budget.
Okay, is any member of the public wishes to make any testimony? Well, in that case, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.